Thank you for visiting iSkymaster.com. Guys, here's another training video for those of you who are new to USB to TTL converters and what they are all about. So just like previous training videos, I have just put a one pager that you can print it out, and hopefully that will help you to understand how these devices really works and what are the key differences between all kinds of variation of USB to TTL converters that you have seen in the market. So the USB to TTL converter is basically a simple device that makes the connection between your laptop and your FPV equipment. The problem is that a majority of the FPV equipment that you will find may have a USB port for some various type of communication between, let's say, an Arduino pilot and your mission planner. However, when you want to do some kind of a firmware upgrade or want to do code changes or other things, you will have to connect to the motherboard of that FPV gear through one of these devices in order to reprogram the microprocessors or the EEPROMs and so on. Okay. Now, in the good old days, about 4 or 5 years ago, most of the computer had an RS232 port on it. If you remember those little DB9 or DB25 ports. Nowadays, on the laptops and other computers, you would not find one of those. The only thing you have to communicate between your laptop and FPV devices is a USB port. So what this device does, it takes a USB signal, which is basically still a serial signal, and converts it into a true TTL, which stands for transistor logic, but in the electronics industry is basically called an RS232 protocol. Okay, in plain language, it's basically a mechanism that allows two devices to exchange data between them. Okay, now when it comes to RS232 communication, there are two ways two devices can talk with each other. So just like us human beings, both of us can start talking and there is no handshake between us. Or the other method would be one person talks, the other listens, then the other person stops talking and goes into a listening mode, and the other device starts to talk. Okay, so in that methodology, you can use what is called a hardware handshake or a hardware protocol between the two devices. So if you look at these USB to TTL converters that are available in the market, now they range from $2 to up to $6 or $10. You will notice that one of them has 5 pins and the other one has 6 pins. And here's the key difference between the 5 pin and the 6 pin. The 5 pin has your typical 5-volt out. Okay, you have your ground, you have your TX and RX pin, and you might have a 3.3 volt pin out. And the other version, you will notice, has 6 pins, and one is your ground, then one is called CTS, one is called VCC, then TX, RX, and DTR. Okay, so depending on your FPV equipment or the gear that you're trying to reprogram or trying to upgrade the firmware, you have to see if that device is looking for a serial communication or a hardware serial communication handshake. So the key difference is that in serial mode only, which is called software flow control, okay, there is no hardware flow control between the two devices. It is only using the TX, RX, and the ground pin. In a hardware flow control between two devices, you will require 2 additional pins, or sometimes even 3 additional pins. So as far as the USB TTL converters that I have seen in the market have these 2 additional pins. DTR, which stands for data terminal ready. Okay, so this pin goes into from 0 volt to 1 volt, which basically notifies the other device that, okay, I'm ready and I can communicate with you. Now, the CTS pin, which stands for clear to send, will go into a high state when it's ready to send the data to the receiving device. Okay, so it's just an electronics mechanism to communicate and do a handshake between the USB device and your FPV gear. If you take a snapshot of this one sheet and print it out, I think it will should help you to better understand how this USB to TTL converters really operate. My suggestion would be, instead of buying 5 and 10 of these for various configuration, you just get the one with the 6 pin, because you can configure that one for both just TX, RX, and ground configuration, or you can change it for hardware flow control in the software that you will be using to communicate with your FPV gear. Um, in the next training video, I will show you how do you actually access this USB to TTL converters. There are like millions of all kinds of softwares available in the market. So I'll try to help you understand and simplify, how to communicate with this little tiny dongle here. Any questions? Please feel free to leave your questions in the comment section, and I will attempt to answer as many as I can. Thanks again, and thank you for visiting iSkymaster.com.